One of the most dynamic parts of mentoring people is watching someone grow and achieve levels of accomplishment they never thought possible. And sometimes those accomplishments are overcoming battles they never imagined they would have to face. Imagine waking up one morning feeling just slightly ill, and within days, your family is telling you you won't make it through the week. Today, we're going to talk with Jennifer Jones Austin, mother, wife, attorney, and child advocate, who faced her biggest unexpected battle and won by trusting God through the process. Jennifer, thank you for allowing us to come into this home. And I couldn't help but thinking about the history that's associated with this block in Brooklyn and a voice that emanated from this very space.
My home is very special to me. And so for you to be here, to take the time to be here, means the world to me. My parents moved to New York in the early 60s, and having a father who was very prominent in the Brooklyn community, people knew that this was his home and they respected it. There's a respect that people have had for this home and they've had for my father.
Your dad was an amazing man.
I think so.
One of the great ideas that emerged from the Protestant Reformation was the idea of what is known in the Latin as per vocationem, which simply means serving God through one's vocation. Any vocation, any job, whether great or humble, that contributes to the good of people, serves to glorify God.
I got to see him interact, listen to him on the radio, of course, and his deep, billowing voice. But he earned that respect, as well as inspired a sense of loyalty to him. He embraced not just the world of church and religion, but he also understood he had a social responsibility.
Yes. He was always dad, and he was just dad in different places and at different times. But he always let me see him in whatever he did. I saw the individual, whereas other people saw renowned preacher, pastor, civil rights leader. I always saw dad.
He loomed large, not just in stature, but in who he was as a person, the respect that he garnered, and how people looked at him. Often, as a PK, you were a PK, preacher's kid. It's difficult, and what I like and commend about you is that you chose to walk in your dad's footsteps, move out from under that shadow. How and when did you find your own voice?
Over the course of the last several years, I've come to appreciate that I had a father who believed in me and let me know it at every turn. The other thing that he and my mother did for me was they both pursued professions, if you will, about which they were very passionate. My mother was an art curator. She was the first African-American woman to be the curator of a Fortune 500 corporate art program. She came from Kentucky, little black girl who went to college, said she wanted to major in art history, and people laughed at her and told her, that's not the profession for a black person. But she did it. And she came on to New York and went on to become the curator of the then largest corporate art program in the world. Not the nation, but the world. And then I had my father. So I saw people who lived their passion, which then in turn told me, find your passion and live it. And so I went to law school, and while there, searching for a law review note topic, I happened upon a case of a young man at 15 years of age who was tried and convicted for the killing of his father. He was up for sentencing, and at sentencing, the judge presiding over the case overturned the verdict, finding that the defense had presented enough evidence showing that this young man acted in what he believed was self-defense because he had endured years and years of physical and emotional abuse at the hands of his father, so much that he thought his life was always in jeopardy. It was in that moment that I felt like God was speaking to me, and that I had lived a life where so much had been poured into me, and people had demonstrated service And at the time of graduation, or just before, as I was contemplating what to do next, law firm offers and the like, God spoke to me and said, I want you to work on behalf of my vulnerable children.
So that you came to a point where child advocacy became your calling. And you see that moment as divine providence, as a call upon your life, that you would now give your life fully to that. So you got a law degree, all right? You've got a sense of purpose, the direction to take that purpose, and you're doing something that you love. You have all of that family support around you, and then all of a sudden, life changes dramatically for you.
Friday morning in September 2009, and I woke up and I felt under the weather, but it wasn't so much that it kept me in bed. I got up, I got dressed, I had a board meeting, went to the board meeting, and did a little bit of work, and then I came home and I got in bed. And that Saturday was a big day in my family. My father was deceased. He'd been dead for 3 years, and a street in Brooklyn was being named after him. So I tried to muster up the strength to get up and go to the street naming, and I couldn't. I just couldn't get myself together. And in that moment, we decided we should go to the hospital. The attending physician said, looks like a run-of-the-mill virus. Just go home, take 2 Advil, and sleep it off. So that's what I did. Not less than, I guess just a little under 2 days later, Monday morning, I woke up and I could hardly see. My vision was completely blurred. Everything just looked white. And that's when I knew that this is probably not just a virus. Now it's Tuesday, and the doctors are looking at me and they don't know what's going on. And they run a battery of tests. And about 24 hours later, on a Wednesday, which happened to be my daughter's birthday, we learned that I had cancer, that I had leukemia. Just came out of nowhere. I had been the epitome of great health. I ate well. I was like a workout-aholic. I took great care of my body. I took great care of my mental well-being. So never had I any sense that, that I was going to come down with cancer. We later learned that it was probably environmentally caused leukemia. I was in 9/11. There's actually a greater incidence. The World Health Organization has found there's a greater incidence of leukemia among people who were down in ground zero.
Wait a minute. What's going through your mind? I mean, you have this ideal life. You're following in the footsteps of your dad in terms of ministering the words of Jesus to the least of these, the most vulnerable in society, children. You're on a good track, a great track, matter of fact. And all of a sudden, this happens.
Because I'd learned from my father's teachings and from my studying that, as my daddy would say, everybody experiences storms. You don't go through life without a storm. He would say, he would preach, everybody's either in a storm, coming out of one, or about to go through one. And so I would pray that whenever my storm hit, whatever it was, that I would be able to withstand the storm and keep a smile on my face.
Sounds like Job. The thing which I feared most has finally come upon me. He gave sacrifices for his children, his life, his family. You prayed. You lived with an understanding that there's a possibility that a storm could come. But did you expect it to be this kind of storm that pronounces a death sentence on you?
Never, never. And while I didn't expect that, I knew it could be devastating because everybody goes through something, right? Now, you don't live life without going through something. So don't ever think you're just going to get off, like you're going to be the one that gets a pass. 2 days later, after diagnosis, I didn't know it at the time, my lungs were filled with leukemia, and my body was giving way. The doctors told my husband on a Friday, they put me in a coma, and they told my husband, she's going to die. They gave me a 99% 99% chance of death. They told him to bring our children in. They were 12 and 7 at the time, to say goodbye to their mother if they wanted to see her one last time. And so my children came to the hospital and stood, and they came in to say goodbye to their mother because I wasn't supposed to make it. So I'm come out of a coma. My sister is there with me, and they've told my family that that they have to bring me current very quickly. They have to let me know what's going on. So my sister is just going on and on. She's so excited, and she's telling me about the people who've come to see me, the people who've written cards, sent cards, the people who've made calls, et cetera, the people who've been praying. And I look at her and I say, I literally am just coming out of the coma, and I say to her, this isn't about me. And she responds, yes, it is. They've come for you. And I said, no, it's bigger than me. I don't know why. I don't know how. But very early on, I appreciated that if I was suffering, if it was for some reason bigger than me.
So suffering has a purpose.
Suffering has purpose. One of the things that I learned through the journey was when experiencing struggle, crisis, if you lean unto God and kind of like lean less on your own resolve and resources, you actually become more in sync with Him, if you will, or at least in my head, I think. And so I felt like I started hearing Him, and He was talking to me in ways that I had experienced before, but it was like in real time.
So this opened you up
It
to a whole
opened me
new
up.
relationship with God. I love the fact that, and I think this is based upon what you experienced as a child growing up, witness to your father's faith and ministry and his strength and tenacity, because it would take a degree of strength and persistence and courage to make this journey that you were facing. And did you feel that you had to be strong for others as well, not just for yourself?
I did feel like I had to be strong, and it manifested in different ways. There were moments during my illness when, like the ugliest days, there were moments when I would walk by a mirror and, the chemo and the radiation caused me to present in the mirror differently than I'd remembered myself. Bald, my complexion grayed, no hair whatsoever on my face. And I'd have to search for myself, and I would kind of shut everybody out. Because if I didn't, then I'd have to be on for everybody. I was trying to embrace death while living, not giving up, but I had to, with 2 young children, I had to prepare them for my death. I had to prepare me to prepare them for my death.
That's powerful. You're facing death while you're living, and you've got to prepare others for that death, which means that you were already prepared yourself or didn't have time to think about that preparation. Which was it?
I think that by preparing my family for life without me, I was bringing myself to a place of acceptance, if that was the will of God.
Now, you've just summed up the end of Job's story.
Right.
The scripture says when he prayed for his friends,
Yes.
his own life and calamity was turned around. So you're definitely in the book, and we're digging the text like your dad did.
Job was my go-to. That was my first go-to. Because there's purpose in suffering. And again, because of my relationship with Christ, I, right off the bat, had to believe that if He was allowing me to suffer, then there was greater purpose for it. Learning that the chemotherapy that had been given me while I was in a coma, when they thought I had this 99% chance of death, that chemo had killed the cancer, put it into remission. But having been told that it would likely come back, and with a vengeance, if I didn't have a new bone marrow and blood-making system, and that I needed a bone marrow from somebody of the same race and the same ethnicity, because you have the same or similar genetic typing, we quickly began to learn of the issue, the challenge facing people of color when it comes to finding bone marrow donors.
Bone marrow, that's a whole new world. And how sure were they that this would work for you?
I had a 50-50 chance if I got a bone marrow donor, but first I had to get a bone marrow donor.
What were the odds? What were the odds?
What were the odds? Well, what they believed is that if you have the same mother and father, you have full-blooded siblings, you're going to get a match there. There's a really, really good chance you should get a match. 3 full-blooded siblings. They all were tested. They matched each other, and they didn't match me. So then we turned to the bone marrow registry. At that time, there were 8 million registrants, 8 million people that had signed up to be a donor for an unrelated person. We thought we'd have a really good chance. 8 million, surely there'd be a match in there. But then we also learned that there were less than 500,000 people of African descent in the registry. I'm of African descent. I'm African American. When the doctors looked at the 500,000, they didn't find a match. My husband said, why don't we do donor drives? And the doctors told us that we probably shouldn't, that we shouldn't waste our time doing donor drives, because if there wasn't a match among 500,000 people of the same, African lineage or similar, if there wasn't a match among the other, 7.5 million, what we were going to do? We were going to do maybe, 2 or 3 drives. We'd get maybe 100 people, in aggregate. And what was the likelihood? What was the chance that I was
The
going to
doctor
get
said that.
This is what the doctor said.
He didn't know about community.
He did not know about community. He didn't know about community. He didn't know about Sean Austin, right? And Sean said to me,
Your husband, Sean.
My husband,
Yeah.
Sean. Met him in college, and I'll quickly tell you that I was in my 3rd year of college when I met him, and my whole approach to dating him was, let's just enjoy the moment. And I tell that to friends all the time now. Just enjoy the moment, and if you focus on the moment, the other may come. When we learned I needed that bone marrow, unrelated donor, we said, let's turn to the community of the faithful, the praying community again.
I remember that, so distinctly, because your husband knew a couple who attended our church, Friendship and Relationship, and they came, and we announced it. 3 services, and we had some close to 4,000 people each, and they rallied. They rallied. And I remember my wife said, I got involved, and I gave mine, and I contributed.
Right.
And we were so excited about the whole idea of being involved in someone's healing in this way.
What I remember when I learned about CCC, Stepping Forward, was that this was a community that, I was aware of. And I remember thinking, you didn't have to. You didn't know me. And you were one of the first churches that had no affiliation with me directly. Of course, you knew my dad. My dad had great respect and appreciation for you, and it was a reciprocal relationship. But you didn't have to. And you allowed that. And the interesting thing is, one of the things that I learned, one of the kind of the side benefits from that whole experience, was I saw community taking care of community. And as a poverty fighter and working on behalf of vulnerable children and their families, it helped me to appreciate that the community has the tools to take care of others. So you all did that. And along with other churches around the nation, in less than 13 weeks, better than 13,000 people were added to the registry. The largest number of people of African descent ever added in 1 year. The largest number of potential donors ever added by one family's effort. So, they thought we were going to do 100 people at best.
Sure.
We got the 13,000. And interestingly, in real time, we started hearing about people receiving word that they were going to be transplanted because of someone who had joined to help save my life.
So all these other people are getting healed as a result of this drive.
Right,
but not you.
but not me. And I'll be honest, I prayed to God. I said, please, please, this is wonderful. And thank you for this gift of giving this suffering purpose and meaning. But I don't want to be a martyr. If I don't have to, I don't want to be. I felt a little guilty about that.
Oh, you wanted to be one of the healed. Absolutely.
I wanted to be one of the healed. And then I learned that God, he didn't have an unrelated donor, but he had something else for me. We talked about me pursuing a career in child advocacy. We talked about me feeling that God placed on my life the calling and the responsibility to work on behalf of his most vulnerable children. The doctors told me that they had found umbilical cord blood. The cord blood that is thrown in the trash when babies are born. And their mothers decided at their birth to donate their cords to a public cord blood bank.
Wow.
To be available should somebody ever need them. That cord blood has stem cells in it that can regenerate, create blood and bone marrow. So when I think about this, I think about what happened. I think about how 25 years earlier, God said, I want you to work on behalf of my most vulnerable children. And I dedicate my life to pursuing the calling he's placed upon me. And then in my darkest day, in my greatest, up until now, my greatest moment of despair, when I needed someone to help save me, it wasn't my family. It wasn't those 8 million in the registry. It wasn't the 13,000 we brought forward. It was those 2 little African-American baby boys. Here I was living to work on behalf of vulnerable children. And when I needed somebody to save me, God sent those children.
Amazing God. And then you put it into a book. You relive the whole story. And I'm sure when you relive it and begin to write it down, that's a whole new experience of revelation, because it's not just what happened. You're beginning to get even a greater sense of purpose and insight as you go through the details.
People kept telling me while I was going through the experience, and even in the days, the weeks, even the months and years afterward, that I should write a book. I kept saying, why? There are 1,001 books about cancer, so why do I think I need to add to the books? And then one day, I was actually in a worship service, and the preacher was preaching from the book of James. Chapter 1, consider pure joy when you face trials and tribulations, because the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its course so that you may be more mature and complete, lacking nothing. And in that moment, it was like an aha moment. There's a book that needs to be written, not about the what-tos of cancer or the how to get through,
Right.
but the book of experiencing a life-altering, a life-threatening challenge. Maybe it's illness, maybe it's something else, loss of some other type, and trying to find, that well, that reservoir, that strength that is within to not necessarily accept, but embrace, and then journey through.
You were forced to make a decision about embracing suffering. Many would rather not have to deal with it at all. I cannot help but think of the words of the Apostle Paul when he talks about his desire to know Christ in a deeper way. And he says there are 2 ways: that I might know him in the power of his resurrection, but also that I might know him in the fellowship of his suffering. And you've witnessed both sides of God. The power of the resurrected Christ, who comes to transform a life and give us a life of beauty and strength and courage and family and success and purpose. But you also looked into the abyss, the darkness of death and suffering. So out of this, you've come to know God and yourself in a deeper and more profound way.
I got to understand and appreciate that, that sometimes as Christians, we believe that if we love Christ and we seek to live according to his teachings that, that our lives should be glorious and worrisome free. They should be blemish free, if you will. Let's not even touch like real suffering. But if we suffer with him, we shall reign with him.
Yeah.
And if we go deep, deep, deep in our darkest moments and we seek him, that's when we get to know him best.
Wow. Not everyone can say that. Not everyone wants to say that. We'd rather have all of the light, bright, beautiful, wonderful pleasures of life, and sometimes think we're due them because we've been a good Christian. But bad things can happen to good people, and it's still not God's fault. We're in a fallen world, broken society, wounded society, subject to death, sickness, disease, and according to our faith, until Christ returns, we have to face this. But we get glimpses and tastes of the world and life to come that is free of all of this when God does things like what he's done for you. It's an amazing story. It's a journey for you. What do you want the reader to leave with after this, they read this book?
So what I hope is that through this book, as I take people on the journey, that they will live it with me. And then you can relate it to your life and see how when you go through those darkest moments, there's growth, there's opportunity, right? God is doing a wondrous thing, and something good can come of it.
I love the title, Consider It Pure Joy. And Scripture teaches us that all true joy is born of sorrow. And out of sorrow comes life's greatest lessons. We don't like it that way, but that's the reality. And this world, this earthly experience, is really a testing and proving ground for the life to come. And I know that every day that you wake up and see the sun rise, or even if it's raining outside, you welcome that day. You embrace that day in ways that you would have never done had you not gone through this.
Absolutely. This has been so special for me.
And thank you for tuning in to this special A.R. Bernard. God bless.